I want to start by telling you one of my favorite stories of a favorite moment in my life. It came in about 2009. I can't remember exactly what year it was. But somewhere around 2009, myself, another gentleman about my age, which at that point, that would have been 14 years ago, so I would have been 25-ish, somewhere in there. The two of us became responsible for the lives of two young teenage males and two dogs as we decided to go on a 60-hour backpacking trip in the mountains of Colorado. And when I say a backpacking trip, I don't mean like we went in and we drove our cars into a spot and then we put up our tent with our cars right there so that we could get out. I mean, we parked our cars, or a car, and then we drove several miles down the road to another point and we parked another car, and then we backpacked through the mountains, through the trees to get back to our original car. To where at the furthest extent of this trip, if something had happened to us, we would have been a good 12-hour hike in order to get to the nearest vehicle that we had. Through the course of this, it was an incredible experience for me. I'd never done something like this before. Fortunately, the other guy my age was really experienced in this, and he knew the way, he knew how to keep us safe, all those things. But we camped just out in the middle of nowhere. We took our tent on our backs with us, hence the backpacking part of it. So we took our shelter on our backs. I borrowed. I didn't buy anything for this trip other than my food because, I'm not like wealthy now, but I was even more broke then. So I didn't buy anything. I borrowed everything. But I remember, laying there in my one-person tent with my dog sleeping outside because there was no way in the world I was going to let that stinky wet thing in the tent with me. I'm just not that nice to animals. I'm sorry. If you think I'm a horrible person for that, well, then I guess I'm a horrible person for that. But my dog slept outside, I slept inside, and I remember laying there going, man, I could fall asleep so much easier if I had my iPad so that I could turn something on and, I could have a show while I'm going to sleep. But I didn't have room to take things like iPads and stuff like that along with me. In fact, all I had room to take in with me was the tent that I already mentioned, some food for myself and a little bit for the other guys while they were carrying some of mine as well, and water, and then some iodine tablets in order to make the water from the streams drinkable because we couldn't take enough water in to last us the entire 60 hours. We had some little packets that maybe made some of the water taste a little bit better after we put in the nasty iodine packet, because if you've ever done that before, iodine does not taste good. It keeps you healthy, but it tastes disgusting. Now, I know there are some people who enjoy it. I am not one of those people, and I think there might be something a little off with you if you are one of those people. But we had an incredible time. I remember going through there, and I remember one of the logs. I can picture it in my mind. I'm not going to try and explain it to you because you're probably going to go, I don't care. But I remember sitting on a log and having a meal as we opened up our food, and we just sat there and we talked. I remember our motto of everything you pack in, you must pack out. And I remember convincing some of the students at the beginning of it that when we said everything you take in, you have to take back out. And realizing on day 2 that they took us very seriously, and everything that came out of their body, they were putting back into their backpacks so that they could take it back out. Fortunately, they did think far enough ahead, and they put it in a baggie ahead of time. That's when we explained to them what that really meant. I remember the idea that if we run out of food, we're not going to run to McDonald's to get more food. This is it. What we carry in, we have to ration so that we can have enough to get us through. And I remember having to think through, we don't know how far it's going to be to the next stream or the next river to get more water, so we can't just guzzle our water as we're hiking through here. I remember getting to the point where we got to an area called the Twin Lakes, and just looking at these beautiful lakes up in the mountain that very few people ever see because very few people are willing to go on this journey up in there. I remember the weight on my pack getting lighter, even though my legs thought that it was getting heavier because my legs were getting more and more tired as we went along. I remember when we were almost done, the big giant group of people that was coming in with llamas, and their llamas were loaded down with all those extra things that we didn't take with us. They were going for comfort. We were going to survive. And that was really our number one goal on the entire trip. While we wanted to have fun, while we wanted to make memories, while we wanted to get some fitness activity involved in our lives, and we wanted to have some great conversations, our number one goal on that trip was to be alive at the end of the trip. And so we took in what we knew that we would need to survive on the trip, not what we needed just to have fun, or not the wants that we might have wanted to have with us. And as I look back in some of the training I received from Rob, he was the guy who was my age, he was the guide. He kind of walked us through ahead of time on, okay, here are the wilderness survival tips that you need to know, just in case something happens. In case I fall off a cliff, and I believe he actually said those words, in case I fall off a cliff and you are all on your own and you are lost out here in the wilderness, here's what you need to know. The first thing you need to do is to make sure that you have your shelter. Hence the reason that we took in our backpacks. When you are lost in the wilderness, one of the first things they tell you to do is make sure you find shelter, especially if the weather is bad. Shelter protects us from the weather, the elements that are coming in. Shelter keeps us dry. Shelter can also protect us from the other animals that are out there in the wilderness. And so one of the first things they'll tell you in wilderness survival is find shelter, and then they'll say find water. As much as I don't like to drink water, I have to acknowledge that most of my body is made up of water, and therefore I have to put it in my body. The number one killer of people who are lost in the wilderness is dehydration. I'm one of those guys that has gone on multiple mountain hikes and didn't take enough water, and by the end of it, I knew I hadn't taken enough water. But I was too stubborn to take it. I don't know what it was. I just don't like water. 78% of the people who are lost in the wilderness and end up dying in the wilderness die because of dehydration. And then there's another large percentage of them, I don't remember what it was, but there's another large percentage that die because they drank bad water. They got sick from it. Water is one of the essentials of the things you have to find if you're lost in the wilderness, and then there's food. You've got to have something to eat. You can go a little longer without food, but you have to find something to eat. Our bodies need fuel. Just like our cars need fuel, whether it's gas, diesel, or electricity, our cars need fuel in order to be able to move. Our bodies need fuel in order to be able to move. And some would say, those are the three absolute essentials, but they would also say, if you can do it, make a fire. Because fire will keep you warm. Fire will dry out your clothes if you get wet. Fire will dry out your shelter if the inside of your shelter gets wet. Make a fire if at all possible. Those are the things that we truly need in order to survive. Whether it be in the wilderness, whether it be in life, we have to have those things with us. And one of the number one goals, in fact, I would say the number one goal that people have as they live life, or as they go through life, I should say, is to truly live life. They'll describe it in different ways. We look for happiness. We look for peace. We look for wealth. We look for fame. We look for all of these different things. But what we're truly all looking for is we want to get to the end of our life and say, I really lived my life. I was alive during it. And I think that this is a little bit what was going through Jesus' mind with a lot of the teaching that he did in his time that he walked with us. I wonder if it's what was going through his mind when he stood on a hillside and he was speaking to over what we read as 5,000 men plus women and children, as he's speaking to them, and he's been speaking for apparently quite a while. People have come in from a long ways away. You know, we get done at 11-ish, so our stomachs aren't too terribly hungry yet, although some of us, if we didn't eat breakfast, they might be starting to rumble a little bit. He had apparently gone at a time of the day, and people had traveled in from far enough away that they were getting hungry, and their stomachs were starting to rumble, and they weren't really able to listen to a lot of what he had to say anymore because their stomachs were louder than his voice coming through their ears. And his followers finally came up to him, and they said, look, Jesus, your teaching is great. It's incredible. But the people are hungry. Like the people they're starting to talk about, hey, what are we going to eat? We came all the way out here. Now what are we going to eat? You know, generally speaking, if we're going to do something that goes over the noon hour, we provide food for whatever it is that we're doing. Because the noon hour is kind of our general time to eat. These people were thinking the same thing. They're like, okay, we're here. and it's mealtime. Where's the food? And Jesus looks at it. You can read it for yourself in John chapter 6. Jesus looks at his disciples as they come up to him and they say this, and he says, well, then, if they're hungry, then do the logical thing. Feed them. And they're sitting there and they're going, you came in here with us. Like, you packed in the same food that we packed in here, meaning nothing. What do you expect us to give them? Like, do you understand how much it's going to cost to go down to Taco Bell and feed all these people? If we had 5,000 men, plus women and children, as it says in Scripture, all together in one place, I'm not going to lie to you, I wouldn't be able to afford to feed you all. And Jesus is looking at them and he's saying, feed them. Duh. So you've probably read the story at some point if you've grown up in church, and if you haven't, I'm going to give you the highlights of the story. That Jesus tells them this, and so they go out and they do the only thing they can think to do. They can't afford to go out and buy food, so they go out and they just start asking people, hey, did you happen to bring any food? What about you, Tim? Did you bring any food along today? Did you bring any food to church today? No? Okay. Jake, did you bring any food along today? And they're asking this question over and over and over again, and they go up to a boy who had brought along some bread and some fish. Like, it would figure that in a time where there was going to be food needed, it would be a young male who was like, I'm going to think far enough ahead, and I'm going to bring a snack. Like, I don't know about all these old people out here, but I'm going to bring along something to eat. And so this boy offers up his food, which he doesn't have to do. He doesn't have to say, here, you can have it. But the disciples come back to Jesus. He sees how much there is, and he says, all right, now start spreading it out. And you have to think, if you're a disciple in this moment, you've seen him do a few great things. But you're going, we're not going to get past the first 12 people with this. Like, maybe if we give out bites of bread the size of what we do for communion, we can serve 100 people or something like that. But we're not getting very far with what we have of this fish and this bread. And by the time they're done, everybody has had as much as they've wanted to eat, and they've got 12 basketfuls left. It's a miracle. I mean, it's literally a miracle that Jesus performs. And I know people look at it and they try and explain it away in different ways, and some will doubt the story as they read the story. But it is one of those miracles that is recorded in Scripture that we believe and hear anyway that happened. And so the people, they're fed, and we get to the end of the day, and Jesus, having taught all day, not to mention he had to walk to the place where he was teaching. He didn't get in a nice comfy car with air conditioning to drive there. He had to walk to where it was that he taught. He stood on a hillside all day long teaching to all these people, and then he performed this miracle that fed all of them and had to wait for it to be dispersed and all this as he's having conversations the whole entire time. Jesus he's exhausted. He's tired. And he looks at his followers and he says, all right, here's what we're going to do. There's a whole bunch of people here, and if we stay here, we're not getting any sleep tonight at all. I'm exhausted. I need a little bit of time to myself. And so he says, you guys get in the boat, you head across the sea, and I'll meet you tomorrow. Which I'm sure, again, they're sitting there going, how's he going to get across? Like, I guess he'll borrow a boat from somebody. They figured he can figure it out. He's a big boy. He can make his way across. And we get halfway across. It's the middle of the night, and we see that this storm has started to come along. It says the gales began to get strong. The gales of wind were strong against their boat, and the waves were rising, and the disciples were becoming scared. And then on top of that, first off, let's just point this out. For those who were fishermen amongst the disciples, for them to be worried about what was happening meant that this was not just some little breeze out on the water. These were experienced fishermen. They were experienced seamen, and they were getting a little bit nervous, which isn't the only time that happens in their time with Jesus. But to top it off, as they're getting worried about the weather coming along, and they're getting worried about the water crashing into the boat and sinking them, they see somebody walking across the water. And so you can imagine that probably terrified them a little bit too. If you saw somebody walking across the water, now, when we were in Boston, we did see somebody with like a water hoverboard thing, and it was pretty cool, and it kind of looked like they were just gliding across the water, but they were on something. No, this guy is just walking across the water, and so this adds to their fear until they realize that it's Jesus, and at that moment, they're no longer afraid. They're not afraid of the man walking on the water. They're not afraid of the storm all around them because Jesus is here. One of our survival needs is shelter. And what shelter does is protect us from the elements all around us. It keeps us safe with all of the things going on all around us, the storms in life, the literal storms and the figurative storms in our lives. The shelter is there to keep us protected in the midst of all of those. And Jesus comes along, and it's because of him and him looking at them and saying, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of me walking, and don't be afraid of this storm because I am here. In Matthew 8, we read another story where Jesus calms a storm, where in the midst of the disciples getting freaked out and Jesus taking a nap in a boat, he comes up and he looks at the waves and he says, be still. And the storm calms down. In Psalm 18 and verse 2, the psalmist writes, the Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my Savior. My God is my rock, in whom I find protection. What does shelter do for us? Shelter provides protection. And Jesus comes along and figuratively, and in these cases literally, says, I will provide you protection. I will be your shelter. I will meet what you need in order to survive, in order to live. I will do that for you. And as our story continues on, we see that they get to the other shore, and as they get to the other shore, of course, there are people who have figured out that he's there, and all of a sudden they're surrounding him yet again. Only this time, they're not just sitting there saying, hey, please teach us. This time, they sit there and they look at him and they say, hey, feed my belly. I heard what you did on the other side, or maybe some of them were the people who were on the other side. But they looked at him and they said, we've heard about that, or we experienced that, and we want you to do it again. It was kind of nice getting that free meal, and it was incredible to see what you did with that. Feed my stomach. I need food to survive. And while the day before, Jesus had literally given them food to eat, to survive, today he looks at them and he says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry again, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Number one need, shelter. Number two need, food. Number two is water. Number three is food. Jesus has already proven he is the shelter, and here he says, and I am also your food, and I am also your water. When you come to me, you will never be hungry again, and you will never be thirsty again. It's reminiscent of in Matthew 4, verse 4, when Jesus has been in the wilderness, and he's physically hungry. And the tempter comes to him, Satan comes to him, and he says, hey, take those rocks and turn them into bread so you can eat them. And Jesus responds with, no, the scriptures say people do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. And it's reminiscent of what he says to the woman at the well in John chapter 4 when he says, if you only knew the gift that God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water. Anyone who drinks this water will soon be thirsty again, but those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. Jesus has shown that he's our shelter, and he tells people that I am also your food and I am also your water. And now we know that it doesn't literally mean that when you choose to follow him, when you choose to give him your life, when you choose to receive him, that you are never going to need to eat food again. And you are never going to need to drink water again. You could try that, and my guess would be that we're not going to see you next week. He wasn't literally telling us that we don't need the physical things, but he's using the metaphor of the things that we need to have in order to live, in order to be alive, in order to still have breath within our lungs. He's saying, I'm going to compare myself to those things that you need, because that's how bad you need me. You cannot truly find life without me. And oh, by the way, even though fire isn't necessarily one of those things that we have to have in order to survive, he also lets us know that he's that too. In Matthew chapter 3 and verse 11, John the Baptist has been baptizing people, and he starts to explain to them what's going to happen when Jesus comes along, when he says that this guy coming along, this man coming after me, he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire. And in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 29, we read that our God is a devouring fire. And in Acts chapter 2 and verse 3, we read the story in the upper room when the disciples are waiting for whatever it was that was going to happen, that Jesus told them was going to happen. And it says what looked like flames or tongues of fire approached and settled on each of them. Jesus says, look, all of the things that you need to survive, all of the things that you need to truly live, I am those things. I am the bread of life. I am the vine that the branch has to be attached to in order to live. I am essential to life. In John chapter 14, verse 6, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. People everywhere are searching for the meaning of life. They're searching to find their best life. They're searching to find the answers to life. They're searching for all these things about life. And Jesus looks at them and he looks at us and he says, here it is. And I know in our world we would hear something like that and we'd be like, wow, that's a really arrogant person. Unless they're right. And unless they're telling the truth. And he looks at us and he looks at everyone else and he says, I am essential to life. And he invites us to receive him, to receive the essentials to life, and then to take those essentials, not keep them for myself, but to share them with everybody around me, not just the people sitting in this room, not just the people attending Church of Gods around the nation and around the world, not just the people attending church, period, around the world, but with everybody. He says you share the essentials to life with everyone. That's why the church exists. We like to come up with a lot of different, mottos, and the church exists to do this, and the church exists to do that. Jesus said some things that we absolutely latch onto, and sometimes we can take one of those and ignore the other one. We can sit there and we can say, he said, go and baptize and make disciples of all the nations, and ignore the part where he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love everybody else in the same way. And so we say it's all this or it's all that, but it's actually all those things. And the church exists to take that life out into the entire world. The church does not exist to sing our favorite songs. It exists so that we can worship the life giver. The church does not exist so that we can be comfortable and do the things that we like to do and the things that we're used to doing. The church exists to receive and to share comfort from the life giver. Comfort and being comfortable are two very different things. The church does not exist to fulfill my preferences. It exists to receive my needs and to meet the needs of others. The church does not exist to walk in a personal relationship alone. It exists to walk with others as we walk with the life giver. The church does not exist to be served, but to serve. It does not exist to receive honor, but to give honor to the life giver. It does not exist so that we can tell people how to try harder, but it exists so that we can show people how to live life and how to live life with the life giver. While backpacking in the mountains of Colorado, those students and my friend and our dogs and I had the one goal, which was to survive. But can you imagine what would have happened if all of us looked at it and said, we're going to approach it a different way? In fact, I'm going to go this way. You go figure it out for yourself. Or I'm going to eat all of the food on day one. Good luck to you the rest of the days, because this is the approach that I think we need to take. If we had all sat there and said, I'm going to do it my way, then there's a very real chance that none of us would have made it out. Now, I understand it's a 60-hour trip, and you can actually go 60 hours without food, and you can go 60 hours without water. So we weren't at a high risk of dying while we were out there. If we had been at a high risk of dying, I'm not sure that we could have gotten the parents to sign off for those 2 students that went with us. Especially if Rob hadn't been with us. If they were just looking at me going, nope, not happening. But it doesn't mean that we couldn't have done something stupid and gotten lost and then been at a risk of dying, because we all wanted to do things our own way. So how do we as the church, and how do we as individuals take that same approach that we had to take on our backpacking trip and be together and be unified and in one mind as we went in there? How do we do something like that with this mission that we're on to take life to the world around us? How do we be in the same mind as we're storming those gates, as we're preparing to rush the field? How do we approach that? Because let's face it, we all have a lot of different opinions. And we come from a lot of different generations. And we come from different parts of the country. And so we have different traditions. We have a lot of difference between us. So how do we make sure that we are of one mind? That's the question that the Board of Servant Leaders and the staff, countless conversations that I've had with others, lots and lots of prayer, that's the question that we've been asking for the past several months. How do we do this? And how do we communicate how we do this? I believe, leadership believes, a whole lot of prayer that led us to this point. I believe that in order to get this, we have to remind ourselves daily that in order to take life to the world, we have to walk humbly together with Jesus. I know there's a lot of other statements that we could make, and we could say, no, you have to do this. You have to go and you have to baptize. You have to make disciples. That's part of this. We ask the question, well, how do we go about and how do we love God above all, and how do we love others as we love ourselves? How do we do all the things that Jesus told us to do? How do we understand what it is that he meant when he said those things? How do we admit to our mistakes that we've made in the past, and how do we move forward knowing that we've messed up so much in the past? How do we do all these things? We do that by remembering that we must walk humbly together with Jesus. And you're going to start seeing that phrase all over the place in this church, and you're going to start hearing it said from up here all the time. In fact, there might even be conversations that you have with one another where somebody looks at you and they say, hey, how are we doing this stuff? I know that some place will call it a mission statement or a purpose statement or things like that. It doesn't really fall into that, and so I've struggled with calling it any of those things. But it's a reminder as to how we take life to the world, how we live in that life ourselves as individuals and as a body. We walk humbly together with Jesus. What I don't want this to ever be is some cute little statement that ends up on a wall somewhere. And we look at it and we're like, oh yeah, that's that thing that we say that we do. Or that's that thing that the pastor says every now and then from up front. But I want us to understand what this means to walk together, walk humbly together with Jesus. And so over the course of the next several weeks, we're going to spend some time and we're going to walk through why were these words chosen? What do these words truly mean? Why walk? Why not run? Why not stand? Why humbly? Why not boldly? Every word, and there's only 5, we wanted it to be something that we could remember. And when you get up to the 15 to 20 word stage, well, we're not remembering that. I've got 5 fingers. I can usually remember 5 words pretty easily. But each of these words was chosen with intentionality. There's only one word up here that didn't receive a lot of discussion as to whether or not it should, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot, as to whether or not it should be in this statement up here. And that word is actually a name. And that name is the whole reason we're here in the first place. We knew that we wanted Jesus to be the last word in this because we want everything to constantly point to him. In everything we do, we want it to point to him. But how do we get there? We walk humbly together with Jesus. And while I would love to start breaking down each of those words this morning, we're going to spend a whole lot more time than just one morning breaking down those words. See, just like when we went into the wilderness, We couldn't do it if we just decided, I'm going to do it my way. Rob could have. The rest of us would have been hopeless. Just like a team, when they take a court or a field or whatever it might be, if they go out there and they all have their own idea of how they're going to approach the game, there's no way they're going to win the game. Just like an army has to go out and they can't look at their commanders and say, nope, we're going to do this our way and expect to win the war. Any organization that's put together has to be of one mind. Not saying that every opinion is the same, but they have a unifying mission that they are on. They have a unifying purpose that they are on. They have a unifying how-to of what they're about to do. And my prayer, anyway, is that we'll be able to communicate why we believe this is our how-to. That we walk humbly together with Jesus. This is why next week we're going to invite Jim Lyon, who is the director of the Church of God, somebody who's become a friend over the course of the past couple years. We're going to invite him to come in, and he's going to share with us on who Jesus even is in the first place. If you've never heard Jim speak, I would encourage you to come, because there are a few people that I have met in my life who are more passionate about Jesus than that man. I would encourage you to be here. This is why I mentioned earlier that we're kicking off community groups, because that together word is in there. That following Jesus isn't a Jesus and me, but it's a Jesus and we. We follow him and walk humbly with him together. That's why I would encourage you. I know that the schedule that we currently have might not work for you, and you might not be able to join one of those, or you might have some hurt from past groups and in your history. I would encourage you to consider and pray over whether or not you're supposed to be a part of one of these. And if you're sitting there and you're going, Sunday and Tuesday don't work, and Wednesday morning I can't come and do a fitness class, but you're thinking, I think God's telling me I'm supposed to lead one, then we would love to hear from you. If you're thinking you need to host one, I'd love to hear from you. If you just want to do childcare so that other parents can go meet at one, we would really love to hear from you. Because we don't do this alone. He didn't ask us to do this alone. His prayer was that we would do this together and that we would be unified like he and the Father and the Spirit are one, that we would do this in that same way. And so I would invite you to join us as we continue. It's not like this is all brand new. I recognize that. So there's some continuation, but as we really jump into what it means to walk humbly together with Jesus. God, we thank you for showing us your own humility while you were here. You were the only one who has ever walked who had no reason to show humility. But yet you redefined the word for us. God, I want us to discover what you mean by that word, because I know it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. God, I pray that you would show us what it means to walk with you and to walk with each other. I pray that you would show us what it means to be together with one another. Not just in our own seclusion, not just doing this life by ourselves or with our, I'm only going to have this family member as part of my life or just my family, but that we are a church body together. And that all of this is with you and with each other. God, I pray that you would make these words come to life and that they wouldn't be our words, but that they would be your words. And that when people ask, what does your church do? We would be able to explain what we do. And not just give them the list of activities that we have, but the purpose that we have behind all of them. God, we want this to be all about you and to point to you every single day. Please show us how to do that.